Psychology, a complete introduction. Introduction. Psychology is the study of human mind and behavior and consists of various subfields and specialities. Psychology is a science because it uses scientific methods of inquiry to develop theories about how humans think and behave. Different types of psychologists work in different settings and using different techniques and client groups in order to develop their knowledge and apply what they know to help people in various ways. What is psychology? This is a question that I encounter more than I ever could have imagined when I began my career. Most people have some vague understanding of what psychology is, but I find that very few can really articulate this into anything meaningful, by which I mean something a bit more than something to do with the brain or even it's about people, isn't it? In fact, many people seem to see psychologists almost as magicians, capable of reading people's minds or even controlling them and making them do things they don't want to. Ask any psychologist about the most common response they get at social gatherings when they reveal their profession, and I'll bet it's this one. Oh gosh, I better be careful what I say, accompanied by some awkward body movements as our conversational partner anxiously imagines we will be analyzing their every move or comment to discover their deepest, darkest secrets. It is true, psychology is about the brain and it is about people. But it's not true that psychologists can uncover your secrets by the way you scratch your nose. In fact, the simplest definition of psychology is that it is the science of the mind. But what do we mean by the mind? And for that matter, what do we mean by science? The mind is the source of a whole range of complex and mysterious functions, including attitudes, thoughts, emotions, and behavior. So, psychology is the study of all that. It is a science because psychologists study the mind using the rigorous methods that any other scientist uses. These include observation, experiments, hypothesis testing, and more, all of which will be explained in more detail in Chapter 2. Obviously, we can't study the mind directly in the same way that physicists can observe neutrons. Psychologists can't exactly cut into the brain to see what is going on, and even if they could, such an investigation would not reveal very much. So, instead, we generally have to study human behavior in order to test theories about how the mind works. Research in psychology, then, seeks to understand and explain how we think, act, and feel. Because psychology is a science, it attempts to investigate the causes of human behavior using systematic, rigorous, and objective procedures for observation, measurement, and analysis, all supported by theoretical underpinnings, explanations, hypotheses, and predictions. Thus, a better definition of psychology is probably this: the scientific study of mind and behavior. Psychology is the study of the mind and behavior. The discipline embraces all aspects of the human experience, from the functions of the brain to the actions of nations, from child development to care for the aged. In every conceivable setting, from scientific research centers to mental health care services, the understanding of behavior is the enterprise of psychologists. Definition of psychology is provided by the American Psychological Association. Interestingly, psychology evolved from the disciplines of philosophy and biology, both of which date back as far as the early Greek thinkers, including Aristotle and Socrates. The word psychology is derived from the Greek word psyche, literally meaning life or breath, and the Greek word logia, meaning the study of something. The groundwork for the study of psychology was laid by the behaviorists, who relied on controlled laboratory experiments to identify the causes of human behavior. Later, cognitive psychologists adopted this same rigorous, laboratory-based scientific approach too, with an emphasis on how thought processes play a role in explaining behavior. Psychologists today explore a wide range of constructs such as perception, thinking, attention, group processes, learning, emotion, motivation, brain functioning, personality, behavior, and interpersonal relationships. Spotlight: the first psychology laboratory. The German psychologist Wilhelm Wundt opened the first experimental psychology laboratory in Leipzig in 1879. The nature-nurture debate. One of the major debates underlying psychology is the so-called nature-nurture one. Put simply, a lot of psychology is concerned with the degree to which our behavior, attitudes, and traits are determined by inherited traits, nature, and the degree to which they are shaped by other influences throughout our lives, nurture. On one side of the debate, you have the biological approach, which focuses on physiological processes and structures to explain behavior. On the other side, there is the behaviorist perspective that states that all behavior is learned through conditioning. In general, those behaviors or attributes that emerge the earliest are most likely to be hereditary rather than learned. Those that emerge later in life, as a result of maturation, are more likely to be learned. Those who adopt the most extreme hereditary perspectives are known as nativists. Their basic assumption is that the characteristics of the human species as a whole are a product of evolution and that individual differences are due to each person's unique genetic code. At the other end of the spectrum, there are the empiricists, who believe that all behavior is shaped by experience. For them, maturation applies only to biological processes rather than to the development of such things as personality. For example, Bowlby's 1969 theory of attachment, discussed in Chapter 10, takes a nativist perspective whereby the bond observed between the mother and baby is an innate process that is there to ensure the infant's survival. Likewise, Chomsky, 1965, proposed that language is gained through the use of an innate, i.e. inborn, language acquisition device. See Chapter 6. In contrast to Chomsky, the empiricist B. F. Skinner, 1957, believed that language is learned from other people via behavior-shaping techniques. We will come across Skinner more in Chapter 5. Another empiricist approach is Bandura's 1977 social learning theory that states that aggression is learned from the environment through observation and imitation. This is seen in his famous Bobo Dole experiment, Bandura 1961, outlined in Chapter 5. Spotlight, Nature and Nurture. Although the phrase nature and nurture had been used by Shakespeare in his play The Tempest, 1610–11, it was first used in its modern sense by the English Victorian scientist Francis Galton, a cousin of Charles Darwin, in discussions about the influence of heredity and environment on social advancement. Case study: Identical twins. Thomas J. Bouchard, a professor of psychology, is well known for his valuable work as director of the Minnesota Center for Twin and Adoption Research, which, by examining twins adopted and brought up by different families, has shed important light on the nature vs. nurture debate. One particular story of identical twins reared apart is so remarkable that it is known simply as the story of the two Jims, Bouchard et al., 1990. In 1979, Bouchard came across an account of twins, both named Jim, Jim Springer and Jim Lewis, who had been separated from birth and reunited at age 39. Both Jims grew up not even knowing of the other. The twins were found to have both married women named Linda, then divorced and married a second time to women named Betty. One named his son James Allen, the other named his son James Allen, and both named their pet dogs Toy. They shared interests in mechanical drawing and carpentry. Their favourite school subject had been maths, their least favourite spelling. They smoked and drank the same amount and got headaches at the same time of day. Jim Lewis and Jim Springer finally met on the 9th of February 1979 after 39 years of being separated. It is important to note that there were also big differences between the pair too. For example, one Jim had married a third time to Sandy, and they wore their hair in different styles. However, the case study does suggest the paramount importance of genetics, nature, over environment, nurture. Subfields of psychology. With its broad scope, psychology covers a wide range of the human experience, such as learning and memory, sensation and perception, motivation and emotion, thinking and language, personality and social behavior, intelligence, child development, mental illness, and much more. Psychologists can investigate these topics from a variety of different perspectives. Each psychological perspective is underpinned by a shared set of assumptions about what is important to study and how to study it. Some psychologists conduct detailed biological studies of the brain using a range of contemporary tools and techniques. Others explore how we process information. Still others look at human behavior from the perspective of evolution, while others study the influence of culture and society on how we behave and think. The different disciplines of psychology described below are thus extremely wide-ranging, and examining these can give you a good idea about what psychology is and what you are likely to learn if you decide to study the subject. Abnormal psychology. This is the study of people who are different from the normal range in a population and who exhibit abnormal behavior. Much hinges, of course, on what exactly is meant by abnormal. This speciality is focused on research and treatment of a variety of mental disorders and is linked to psychotherapy and clinical psychology. Clinical psychology is the applied field of abnormal psychology that attempts to assess, understand, and treat psychological conditions and mental disorders in clinical practice, such as hospital settings, although clinical psychologists are unlikely to use the term abnormal when they refer to their patients. Neuropsychology. Sometimes called clinical neuropsychology, neuropsychology studies the structure of the brain and its functions as they relate to specific psychological processes and particular behaviors. This area is closely linked to neuroscience and uses tools such as the MRI and PET scans to look at brain injury or brain abnormalities. It thus specializes in looking at how studies of brain injury and disease can shed light on normal as well as abnormal functioning. Neuropsychologists often work in research settings, universities, laboratories, and research institutions, although they may also be found in clinical settings involved in assessing or treating patients with neuropsychological problems. Forensic settings, assessing criminals, for example, or occasionally in industry, where their neuropsychological knowledge might be applied to product design or research for drug efficacy. Clinical psychology. This field is focused on the assessment, diagnosis, and treatment of mental health problems. Clinical psychology tends to be underpinned by one of several main theoretical approaches. The cognitive behavioral perspective. This approach to clinical psychology developed from the behavioral and cognitive schools of thought, so involves examining how a client's feelings, behaviors, and thoughts interact. The psychodynamic approach. This perspective was developed by the psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud, who believed that the unconscious mind played a central role in our behavior. Techniques such as free association can be used to investigate the client's underlying unconscious processes that may influence their behavior. The humanist perspective. This approach has its roots in the work of humanist thinkers such as Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers. This perspective looks at the client holistically and helps people overcome their problems by using approaches such as self-actualization. These approaches will be examined in more detail in Chapter 6. Spotlight, a definition of clinical psychology. The American psychologist Leitner Whitmer first introduced the term clinical psychology in a 1907 paper. Whitmer, a former student of the founder of modern psychology, Wilhelm Wundt, 1832 to 1920, defined clinical psychology as the study of individuals by observation or experimentation with the intention of promoting change. Cognitive psychology. The term cognitive psychology was first coined by Ulrich Nesser in 1967 with the publication of his book of the same name, and is the study of mental processes such as attention, language use, memory, perception, problem solving, creativity, thinking, attention, learning, and decision making. This branch of psychology is closely related to other disciplines such as neuroscience, philosophy, and linguistics. The discipline grew out of a cognitive shift away from the behaviorist approaches of the 1950s that focused on outward behavior that can be seen and thus easily measured, to a more processing approach focusing on internal thoughts to explain that behavior. Comparative psychology. This is the branch of psychology concerned with the study of animal behavior in order to develop a deeper and broader understanding of human psychology. The comparative method involves comparing the similarities and differences among species to gain an understanding of human behavior. Areas such as heredity, adaptation, and evolutionary processes can be studied using the comparative approach. Examples of how the study of animal behavior can lead to a deeper and broader understanding of human psychology include Ivan Pavlov's research on classical conditioning, see Chapter 5, and Harry Harlow's work with rhesus monkeys that led to the development of attachment theory, see Chapter 10. Developmental psychology. This is an area that looks at human growth and development over the lifespan. It used to focus only on infants and young children, but nowadays also includes teenagers and adults and the aging process. Theories often focus on the development of cognitive abilities, morality, social functioning, identity, and other life areas. Developmental psychology looks at how people change as they develop and grow in areas such as cognitive development, which includes problem solving, moral understanding, language acquisition, and self concept and identity formation. Forensic psychology is an applied field focused on using psychological research and principles in the legal and criminal justice system. It examines the criminal mind and criminality. Forensic psychology has traditionally been described as the intersection between psychology and justice, and many TV and film representations of forensic psychologists have led to an increased interest in this field in recent years. Areas that forensic psychology might cover include eyewitness testimony, jury decision making, psychological profiling, and lie detection. Industrial organizational occupational psychology is a field that uses psychological research, psychological theories, and psychological principles to enhance work performance, select employees, improve product design, and so on within organizations. Occupational psychologists contribute to an organization's success by improving the satisfaction, safety, health, and well being of its employees. An occupational psychologist might conduct research on employee behaviors and attitudes and how these can be improved through hiring practices, training programs, feedback, and management systems. The field also helps organizations and their employees transition during periods of change and organizational development, e.g., mergers, acquisitions, downsizing, restructuring. Individual differences research. This looks at the various elements that make up individual personalities. Researchers in this area study the ways in which individual people differ in their behavior. Although all psychology is ostensibly about individuals, modern psychologists often study groups or the biological underpinnings of cognition rather than examining the differences between individuals per se. Individual differences research typically includes personality, motivation, intelligence, ability, IQ, interests, and values. Well-known personality theories include Freud's structural model of personality and the Big Five theory of personality. See Chapter 9. Social psychology. This is a branch of psychology that is concerned with how social phenomena influence us and how people interact with others. According to the social psychologist Gordon Allport, who might be regarded as the father of social psychology is a discipline that uses scientific methods to understand and explain how the thoughts, feelings, and behavior of individuals are influenced by the actual, imagined, or implied presence of other human beings. Allport, 1954. Social psychology studies diverse subjects including group behavior, social perception, leadership, nonverbal behavior, conformity, aggression, and prejudice. Many people get confused between social psychology and sociology. While there are similarities between them, the differences are important. Sociology deals with the social aspects of humans, while social psychology deals with the behavior of people in a social setting. Sociology, for example, is more concerned with the study of society as a whole, whereas social psychology is the study of the way society affects the way people think and act. Evolutionary psychology. This looks at how human behavior has been affected by psychological adjustments during evolution. It seeks to identify which human psychological traits are evolved through adaptations, that is, the products of natural selection or sexual selection. An evolutionary psychologist believes, for example, that language and memory perception are functional products of natural selection. An evolutionary psychologist believes that our human psychological traits are adaptations for survival in everyday environment of our ancestors. In short, evolutionary psychology is focused on how evolution has shaped the mind and behavior. Spotlight: the theory of natural selection. Evolutionary psychology has its historical roots in Charles Darwin's theory of natural selection. In On the Origin of the Species, 1859, Darwin predicted that psychology would develop an evolutionary basis. In the distant future, I see open fields for far more important researches. Psychology will be based on a new foundation, that of the necessary acquirement of each mental power and capacity by gradation. Health psychology. This is the study of psychological and behavioral processes in health maintenance and illness prevention. It tries to understand the relationship between physical health and illness and psychological, behavioral, and cultural factors. One approach that health psychology takes is termed the biopsychosocial approach. This is where physical health is understood to be the product not only of biological processes, e.g., a virus, a tumor, but also of psychological processes, e.g., thoughts and beliefs, behavioral processes, e.g., habits, and social processes, e.g., socio-economic status and ethnic background. It is this understanding of the psychological factors influencing physical health that allows the health psychologist to improve health either by working with individual patients or indirectly in large-scale public health programs. Health psychologists might also work directly with other healthcare professionals by training or advising them on the importance of psychological factors in maintaining health or adherence to health maintaining schemes or treatment regimes. What all these different approaches to psychology have in common is a desire to explain the behavior of individuals based on the workings of the mind. And in every area, psychologists apply scientific methodology. They formulate theories, test hypotheses through observation and experiment, and analyze the findings with statistical techniques that help them make important discoveries. Other psychology professions. There is a range of professions that psychologists, i.e., people with at least one psychology degree or qualification, can go into, including many that are allied to psychology or that make use of psychology skills. The section here will focus on the main psychology professions as determined by the British Psychological Society's chartership scheme. These are the professions that the BPS recognises with its benchmark scheme. Some are based on the subfields of psychology outlined above, such as clinical, health, occupational and forensic psychology. Other professions arising from the various subfields include the following, taken with permission from the BPS website. Counseling psychology. Counseling psychologists focus on improving psychological functioning and well-being. Counseling psychologists deal with a wide range of mental health problems concerning life issues including bereavement, domestic violence, sexual abuse, traumas and relationship issues. They work with the individual's unique subjective psychological experience to empower their recovery and alleviate distress. Counseling psychologists work in hospitals, acute admissions, psychiatric intensive care, rehabilitation, health centers, improving access to psychological therapy services, community mental health teams, and child and adolescent mental health services. They also work within private hospitals, private practice, forensic settings, industry, education, research, and corporate institutions. Educational psychology. Educational psychology is concerned with children and young people in educational and early years settings. Educational psychologists tackle challenges such as learning difficulties, social and emotional problems, and issues around disability as well as more complex developmental disorders. They work in a variety of ways, including observations, interviews, and assessments, and offer consultation, advice, and support to teachers, parents, and the wider community, as well as the young people concerned. They research innovative ways of helping vulnerable young people and often train teachers, learning support assistants, and others working with children. In the UK, local authorities employ the majority of educational psychologists working in schools, colleges, nurseries, and special units, although increasing numbers are working directly in schools, academies, and other educational settings. They regularly liaise with other professionals from education, health, and social services. A growing number work as independent or private practitioners. Sport and exercise psychology. Sport psychology's predominant aim is to help athletes prepare psychologically for the demands of competition and training. Examples of the work sports psychologists carry out include counseling referees to deal with the stressful and demanding aspects of their role, advising coaches on how to build cohesion within their squad of athletes, and helping athletes with personal development and the psychological consequences of sustaining an injury. Exercise psychology is primarily concerned with the application of psychology to increase exercise participation and motivational levels in the general public. Sport and exercise psychologists work in a wide range of settings with a diverse range of clients participating in recreational, amateur, and elite levels of competition. Teaching and research psychology. Research in psychology requires the application of skills and knowledge to hypothesize scientifically about an aspect of human behavior, then to test it, analyze it, and communicate the results. Research underpins much of the teaching and practice of psychology as it provides the evidence base for psychological theory and the effectiveness of treatments, interventions, tests, and teaching methods. Typically, academics or researchers in higher education undertake both research and teaching and lecturing. Most researchers are employed in higher education institutions or specialist research units. However, others are employed in a wide variety of contexts, including the food and drink industries, pharmaceutical industries, marketing, government departments, and the NHS.